Hey folks, Doug Blake with Body Design University. In this video, I want to talk to you about the importance of proper form, proper technique during your exercise performance. And really what I'm doing is I'm just answering, some questions, basic questions that I get from students pretty much on the regular, and something that, of course, I've always focused on even from the very early years that I was training folks. I did powerlifting, bodybuilding, and it was in powerlifting that I really understood the importance of proper technique. But the reason it was proper technique was important was because of the loads that I was imposing on my body through these different exercises, right? The bench press, the squat, the deadlift. Um, and so I learned very early on that I should perform my exercises smooth, slow, and controlled. And that's sort of the mantra. I always say that to students during our live course is always think of the mantra of smooth, slow, controlled. Now, it doesn't mean that you're always doing every part of the repetition smooth, slow, and controlled. But the idea is the mantra keeps you in this thinking of don't jerk, don't drop don't drop the weight, don't do the things that we know could cause some significant damage to the joints, to the soft tissue structures, components around the joint, the muscle, the tendon, ligaments, things like that. So smooth, slow, and controlled has always been what I would say over and over and over. So smooth and controlled are really the key terms here. Slow is generally what we do on the negative. I've done other videos talking about the four parts of the repetition and the general understanding that we normally do the negative, right, slower than the positive, and there's reasons for that. But in this case, the importance of doing your exercise technique, really well, perfect. So if you want to use that word, or the ideal technique and why it is so important, first you got to understand what ideal technique looks like. And that's required. We're going to have to do a completely different video because literally on every exercise, you can look at what the perfect technique is. There is no one perfect technique for any one individual on any one exercise. We have basic generalities that we use. Once again, just like I said, slow negatives and your positives a little bit faster, but there's some modifications you can make with that. So the importance of proper form, proper exercise technique comes down to a couple of variables. Number one, the individual, right? Because everybody is different and has a different, unique biomechanical relationship to their on their joints and their muscles, soft tissue, things like that. So everybody is different. The length of your humerus, the way your joints are functioning, are going to be different for you than for me. On the other hand, because we all have generally a shoulder joint, an elbow joint, a bicep, tricep, there are very clear similarities to how we perform exercises. So again, I want to throw out that smooth, slow, controlled concept out to you when we talk about the importance of proper form and technique. So that's one of the variables that we look at is the individual themselves. So depending on whether you have a longer arm or a shorter arm, or your torso is longer, shorter, whatever the case is, you have an injury or you have other debilitating issues at certain joints, that's going to determine what ideal form or good technique is. So that's one variable, is the individual, the unique biomechanics of the individual. But it still comes into play, whether you're 6'5" or 5'2", smooth and controlled. We generally do the negative slow, but I always say that mantra over and over: smooth, slow, and controlled, to get people thinking in a controlled, smooth, right, type of tempo when they perform their exercises. So is it important then, obviously, to be doing exercises, quote, correctly? The answer is yes. And so another variable that we talk about is going to be the amount of load that you're using. Remember, if you're a power lifter, proper technique, smooth, slow movements with pauses in the isometric, particular areas of the isometric contractions on the movements, is not just a good idea, it's essential to the health of your musculoskeletal system. Because when you got 500 pounds on your back and you're doing a squat and you just go, technique may be okay, and you just plop down into it, that's going to be an issue. So slow negatives, right, on the way down on a squat, slow negatives on a heavy bench press. It's not just important, it's critical. It's critical. Now, that's like one extreme way over here, competitive powerlifters. Take it back to the average client. How much importance do we hold to the smooth, slow, and controlled component, like for the average client who's using significantly less weight? Well, the answer to that is that yes, it still is really, really important. And in fact, I would argue that it's probably even in one sense more important to the novice because of the neuromuscular education that's occurring while they're doing their exercises. Remember, there's a lot of neuromuscular facilitation and education that occurs when you first start lifting weights. And the novice simply does not have that higher level of neuromuscular control that a more advanced or experienced lifter has. So the point here is that the amount of load makes a significant difference, of course, but we also want to keep in mind that for the novice, doing the exercises smooth and controlled, right, becomes critically important because of their long-term learning issues that they're going to face when it comes to the neuromuscular system. Excuse me. In other words, I don't want people doing their exercises incorrect. Now, they're not using a ton of weight, so maybe they're not going to hurt their shoulder. I don't know, but why take the chance? I'm going to have them do their movements smooth and controlled no matter what, because what I'm doing is I'm teaching them for the long-term neuromuscular learning and facilitation. So by having them do it, even with light, look, I've had people use 5-pound dumbbells and I still have them do it very controlled, very smooth, pausing in the bottom, because now I can teach their bodies, teach their neuromuscular system how to do it correctly as the weights get heavier. I will say this, every time you allow your clients or yourself to break down in your technique and form, you are causing problems in the long term. Okay. Trust me, I know it. I know it because I used to train incorrectly and my shoulder paid for it many years ago. And so if you teach the proper form and technique right from the get-go, okay, and I'm not talking about ultra perfect technique where you literally, I mean, don't get me wrong, that's how I did it with my clients, but the amount of load will allow for a little bit of discrepancy in this perfect technique, like on a dumbbell curl. Every time you allow a client to break from their form and technique, i.e. smooth, slow, controlled movements, pausing in the stretch isometric, just as a for instance, like on a squat, coming down to the bottom position, holding and pausing before you come back up. Every time you move away from that, this very precise technique that you're trying to get people to learn, you do so at your own risk and the risk of your client. Because again, clients get stronger. They start to use heavier and heavier weights. So the load is going to dictate to a certain extent what the injury potential is going to look like. Allow poor technique to sort of be the order of the day when you're training people. You are looking at an injury sometime in the future. Even if it's not an acute injury, there could be chronic inflammation occurring in the joints because of the technique you're allowing them to move through. And there's any number of exercises and ways to do exercises incorrectly that I can definitely do in a later video. So to answer the question, is it important to really focus on technique? The answer is yes. Can you allow for certain modifications as to the range of motion? Absolutely. But I will say this to kind of end it. It's the speed of the movement that more than anything, coupled with range of motion, especially end ranges of motion, but the speed of the movement, you allow your clients to do fast negatives, ballistic type of movements with or without weight, you're asking for trouble, to be honest with you, unless it is an actual ballistic type of movement like plyometrics. Well, that's completely different. But when we're talking about standard resistance training exercises, smooth, slow, controlled is the order of the day with some modifications as to the four parts of the 3 to 4 parts of the repetition. And so the precision that you're looking for with perfect, quote, perfect technique is always in the forefront, because again, you don't want to cause, number one, an acute injury right then and there, and you don't want to cause any chronic inflammatory responses over the long term. Now, if this video was helpful, please let us know by typing the word understand in the comment section below. As always, let us know on this particular video or any other video that you have watched. Let us know if we can speak more to the issue, or maybe you have questions related to the material in the video itself. Please let us know that. We're more than happy to respond. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.